Hey everyone, it's Craig. Before we start the show, I want to tell you about our Patreon offerings. That's right, patreon.com/Katya and Craig holds a whole host of wonder and delight. The folks in Hot Dog Club know all about, but you might not. So, go there now, patreon.com/Katya and Craig, and check out our offerings. For $5 a month, you get bonus episodes. For $7 a month, you get the bonus episodes plus listener questions episodes, which of course allows you to ask us questions, and we will answer them on the listener questions episode. Which might be surprising given that we call them listener questions, but you know what? It is as simple as it seems. Then for $10 a month, you get all the bonus episodes, which by the way are full length, full throttle, and full fat. All the listener questions episodes, and the movie club episodes. Now, on our listener questions and movie club episodes, we oftentimes have very special guests like Alaska Thunder Funds, Trixie Mattel, Jasmine Masters, Laganja Estranja, Willem, Courtney Act. Coming up soon, I'll be taping a movie club with Ms. Cracker, a listener questions with Ms. Fame, and the list goes on and on. So sign up now at patreon.com/Katya and Craig, and then you can get the entire archive plus every new episode that rolls out. Our friend and previous and future guest, Justin Kelly, has a new film out, J.T. Leroy, The Incredible Story of the J.T. Leroy Scandal. Starring Laura Dern and Kristen Stewart, it's a goddamn good time, and fascinating as well. We have an upcoming episode with Justin and the author of the book that the film was based on, Savannah Knoop, who is the person who played J.T. Leroy. Well, it's complicated. You'll see what I'm talking about. The film is great. It's in theaters right now, and it's also going to be available on iTunes in about a week or two. Lots and lots of dates added to Katya's tour, so go and snap up those tickets now at Katya Live or WeLoveKatya.com. Either one will get you what you need. DragCon coming up soon, in a couple weeks actually, and we're doing our first live podcast from there. Snatch up your tickets now and use promo code Whimsical for 10% off. Now that we have that sorted out, let's listen to a chat I taped in San Francisco with Cherry Torn, Sophie Monroe, and our guest, Peaches Christ.
A Russian ballerina, stomping on a bureaucrat, a perky suburban housewife who just got into scat. It's whimsically volatile.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very, very special episode of Whimsically Volatile, because not only are we joined by co-hosts Cherry Torn and Sophie Monroe, our very special guest is none other than Peaches Christ.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Being in San Francisco, how could we not reach out to you?
The legend.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
It's the San Francisco treat, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the new rice-a-roni.
I have to say, first off, that I regret missing Mean Gaze because my jet lag precluded me from...
I understand.
Yeah.
Jet lag is real.
It is, right? And the ladies just returned from Japan.
Oh, wow.
And I was just in Australia.
Amazing.
We've all been back for about 2 days.
Yeah. So you're a little dazed.
Little days.
Yeah, just a little.
Which is kind of fun.
How do you do with jet lag?
I guess I have my own little tricks here and there. I try to look at what, when I'm flying in and what time of day it is and kind of decide whether I should take a nap or just force myself to stay awake and, basically just try to adjust to their schedule as quickly as possible, even if it means a really horrifying day of forcing yourself to stay awake.
How often can you actually maintain the staying awake thing? Because I'm bad at what happened with me last time is I sat down on my bed, which was really the stupidest thing I could have done.
Right.
And then I just fell asleep in my plane clothes, which usually it's like you have that barrier. You think, okay, I'll change after I get off the plane.
Right.
And that'll sort of get my day going. Nope. Right into it. And then,
See, what I would do is often set an alarm, take a nap, and then really force myself to get up, even if it's just for a few hours.
Yeah.
And then try to put myself to bed at whatever time would be normal, their time.
What was the worst jet lag you've ever had?
It was for Barbarella and it was in the UK, because now it's all coming back to me.
Yeah.
And I was we were meeting these Mancunian queens who were part of the cast, and it was me and I don't know, 3 or 4 of the San Franciscans who flew over to meet maybe 6 of the local cast. And I stupidly was like, I'm just going to stay awake. And then the rehearsal was early evening.
Yeah.
And I was so unable to do anything and couldn't talk, wasn't able to make a sense, and I'm directing the show. It's my
perfect,
and this is their intro to me,
right.
And I was and just too much coffee, and the coffee wasn't working, and and I kept apologizing, saying this rehearsal is basically useless, and I think we had 3 days before we opened or something. So
Yeah.
that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because in a situation like that, you're like, this is a first impression. Even if you're saying, sorry, this is really not me normally.
Right.
It's like someone being like coughing a lot and be like, I'm not contagious. Don't worry about it. You're like, oh, sure. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. When did you start doing the parody shows of films? Because you've had a very long history with exhibiting cult cinema and everything. At what point did you switch over to adapting?
I kind of think it's all an evolution from my Midnight Mass series, where we didn't just screen the movies. We did pre-shows before the movies, and that started in 1998.
Yeah,
in June of 1998, and so the shows even then that summer were parodies, but they might only be a scene or a sketch or sort of a hodgepodge. Like the pre-shows tended to be 15 to 30 minutes back then because we started them at midnight. And then screened a movie.
Right.
And so as the years went on and the pre-shows did become more and more and more elaborate, we started to kind of categorize them where we'd have like a pre-show where a special guest would come when we finally were able to like invite actual, cult movie stars.
Sure.
So we do like an opening number and then a big interview with the star. Then we did shows that were parodies, like a full parody, kind of like what I do today. Maybe shorter, but still kind of a
same.
like a tribute to the movie.
Yeah.
And then we did shows where it was more of a contest or like some sort of weird athletic kind of thing. Like we used to do drag queen roller derby.
Oh, wow.
And and actually like have drag queens on skates and have the whole audience, sign a release of liability form. And
very important, right?
Like people, would get hurt and, but back then, I can't believe what we got away with, you know? Mostly just because we were fearless.
The Wild West days. I love
They were,
those.
yeah.
A little pain with your pleasure is never bad. I just got to say that, I love a show that requires a liability release.
Yeah.
So true. I love the Wild West of San Francisco, too. Those were good. Those were some good years.
They were good years. And, when they were happening, none of us knew how special they were, of course. I sound so old because this is how old people talk. But yeah, I did things that I should have been arrested for sure. We should have been shut down. Like we really pushed the limit and didn't really even know we were doing that.
Well, our two guest co-hosts are. How would you describe yours? Because you have so many hyphenates.
We're sex workers.
Fabulous.
We work a lot for kink.com would be our big San Francisco touchstone.
Yeah.
We direct and produce for them. And then we also do, a lot of female domination stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, the first movie I ever screened was Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, And I got to become friends with Tura later in life and go on tour with her and work with her a lot. So, I always feel like she's one of those icons of just female empowerment. When that movie came out, no one had seen a woman behave that way before in cinema,
That's
and
so true.
I look at it now and I'm like, I'm so glad that women get paid to behave that way,
Right, and that's why sex workers love drag queens because
we have a lot in common.
We have a lot in common.
That's true.
It's this hyper feminine, like just ridiculous creature that you're creating, and I feel like that's exactly what
and some drag queens are sex workers.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that crossover.
Yeah.
Big fans.
That's a hyphenate we can all get behind.
And vice versa. Some sex workers are drag queens. Yeah.
You got that
We
true
try our
hoe.
best.
You can tell.
So I have to ask you guys then, is kink still at the Armory or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's what I thought.
It was sold a few years ago.
God,
They're
I'm
still
so out
in
of
San
it.
Francisco,
Okay.
but just not at the Armory anymore.
So great at the Armory though.
It was the best.
Yeah.
It was the best. We were involved with the upper floor days with that big Edwardian great house at the top of the building.
Oh,
So,
amazing.
yeah. We spent a lot of time. Speaking of Wild West days, we certainly had the early days of the Armory were some of those days.
I bet.
People on skates, maybe not, but the whole liability
we
release.
had skates. We
really?
absolutely
Okay.
had skates. Yeah, when you have that much space, you have skates.
You
for
got to
sure.
have, I'm sure
We
you got to.
definitely should have got shut down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times.
I shot there in 2009, 10 years ago. Yeah.
That's when we were there.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes.
we're making my first feature film, and
All About Evil.
All About Evil, yeah.
Ah.
And a lot of people don't know that, you know, the movie takes place in the Victoria Theater over at 16th and Mission, but there were scenes written into the script that took place in the attic of the Victoria Theater where there was no attic. So, and then also the basement, and there wasn't really a basement we could shoot in. So the basement and the attic of the Victoria Theater are actually an attic area at the Armory.
Wow.
Over like where you guys weren't even shooting, and the crew had to wear, you know, basically masks
Hazmat suits.
Yeah,
because
hazmat
still had the
suits.
poisonous sludge in the basement.
Absolutely. If you remember where there was like the room, we shot in this room where we had Natasha Lyonne, you know, and a guillotine, and, you know, she did horrible things in there. But the room had these sort of like metal grate sort of flaps in the floor.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Those are fun in heels.
Yes. But they explained it to me like you put your head in the box in the floor and kind of these flaps come down around you. Like an
okay.
ostrich. Sort
I
of.
see. Okay.
You put a camera inside so that you can play whatever's going on in the head on the monitor, so you can make sure that things are going well.
Okay.
It was wild.
Yeah.
And then we shot in the basement, the actual basement, you know.
Yeah.
And I loved being there. And I'll never forget Mink Stole. No one told her, you know, what. And you think like Mink Stole, she's done it all. I mean, she's the star of Pink Flamingos,
Certainly,
the greatest
yeah.
cult movie ever made. And, you know, did things on film that still to this day shock people.
Yeah.
Millennials are shocked by those movies because they're so sensitive in a way. And Mink was there, and no one told her like where we were. And I remember Natasha, they had her in a room. And if you don't know what is going on there,
right,
it doesn't. You're kind of like, oh, I'm in a library or whatever, and you don't really notice, you know, what the books are or whatever.
Yeah.
And Mink came out of the bathroom, and she's like, "This is the weirdest bathroom. Why is there a wall of douches?" You know.
Strangest thing.
Yeah. She just, you know, finally we were like, oh, well, this is a porn studio, you know.
You're like, either this is the gayest place I've ever been.
Yeah.
Where did we end up?
Yeah.
You're so polite.
Usually tampons, now it's douches.
Exactly. She just couldn't.
That's amazing to have Mink Stole like do a double take at anything.
She's not really fazed by anything. She certainly doesn't suffer fools. But it was that thing where no one had told her. And
No,
then,
exactly, yeah.
Poor thing. That was actually very stressful because in that attic area where the crew are all wearing the hazmat suits, that was her scene, and Natasha's character had sewn her mouth shut in a previous scene. And so poor Mink had this, you know, application across her mouth, so she couldn't speak, she couldn't drink, and it was dusty in there, and you know it was very stressful. And she was writing on pieces of paper like "hurry," you know, and stuff, which is like, oh my god, you know, when you're making a movie, the last thing you want is like my icon to be screaming at me, you know,
On a notepad.
on a
On
notepad.
paper, right? Yeah, I'm thinking of that William Hurt movie with a little pad on his chest.
Right.
You're a massive John Waters fan. What was your first exposure to his work?
Well, I mean, really growing up in Maryland and being a kid who grew up in a very boring part. Well, Annapolis, Maryland is like sort of the Naval Academy. It's the sailboating capital of the world. It's totally preppy and sort of, I don't know, just so East Coast. And, it sits between D.C. and Baltimore. And when you grow up Catholic there and you're obsessed with horror movies and goth music and anything that's like sort of alternative, especially in that school environment, you know, I think it'd be different if I had gone to public school, but it just felt so square and so conservative that when they were filming Hairspray, it ended up being sort of a crossover thing, and it was sort of, you know, Hollywood to me was sort of a million miles away in my mind, and it was. I mean, it was thousands of miles away, and I wanted to make movies, and I wanted to, but to hear that this filmmaker was making this movie right up the street in neighborhoods where my relatives lived, was surreal. And then to hear a kid come back to school who had been on the set, because, you know, they were using locals.
Sure, right.
And the kid, she said, oh, the movie's so weird. It's about this big fat girl, you know, who can dance. And, you know, she didn't say anything about the racial integration or anything about what the movie was really about. But she did say, and her mom is played by a man, and that was like enough for me to pretend to not be interested. But of course I was like, I gotta see this movie.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like I saw Hairspray, and that led me to, back then you could rent VHS tapes and no one questioned what you were renting.
Oh yeah.
Mom's Video on Kent Island. I'll never forget. We rented Pink Flamingos and we went home and we watched it. And my friend's parents, where we were watching it, basically busted us and caused this huge thing.
What scene did they walk in?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think an older brother ratted us out or something like that.
Yeah.
The confrontation happened after I left. So I think we made it through the whole movie.
Sure.
And then it became an issue. But for me, it blew my mind. My life was forever changed. My entrance to drag was through Divine and through Frankenfurter.
Sure.
And so I have a very filmic cult appreciation for drag, because that's what I was how I was first introduced, and it's also the thing that I'm most connected with, and so I didn't meet John until much later. I was a senior in college. I would go places where I'd heard, in high school, where apparently he hung out and this and that, and look for him and never found him. I would look for people like Mink Stole, and I just never. And I had friends, of course, who'd see them all around Baltimore, all the time, but I never did. And they'd see them like, at the bank or whatever. But to me, they were like these mythological creatures,
right.
And so in college, I was a student leader in the filmmaker organization, but also an activist in the queer activist group. And so at Penn State at the time, I could put together enough money to bring people.
Oh, yeah.
So I selfishly would bring people that I wanted to meet.
Yeah, of course.
So we brought Quentin Crisp and, all these people. Yeah. And so we got to meet these people, and I brought John Waters because I was making a movie called Jizz Mopper, and the school did not like that I was making that. And I thought, well, I'm going to bring a filmmaker who's built a career off this kind of filmmaking. And of course, all the faculty that turned their nose up at my movie were the people first in line to get a photo with John Waters. Which so the hypocrisy,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was very satisfying to be brought back to Penn State 20 years later to screen All About Evil and present it in full drag,
with the teachers lining up to take pictures with you.
Basically, but they were all different teachers, but so I met him then, and I was just a kid who brought him to Penn State. I don't think I was memorable or anything, and it wasn't until I created Midnight Mass and had done that. But what he doesn't remember is that at Penn State, when asking, what I was going to do, it was either going to be New York or L.A., and he was the one who said, "Have you considered San Francisco?"
Oh, wow.
And told me about the Kuchar Brothers and underground filmmaking, Canyon Cinema, and the Coquettes. It was before the documentary about the Coquettes had come out.
Yeah.
And he said, they were this renegade drag troupe that Divine and me and Mink, we all used to hitchhike out to San Francisco and hang out with them in the late 60s. And they did shows at midnight in a cinema in North Beach before they would screen movies. And so that was the seed that was planted in my head.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know I'm going to go to San Francisco and do that. I'm going to do exactly that.
Yeah.
But of course, I look back on it now and I'm like, wow, he really did put me on a course.
Yeah, mapped out some
better
things.
or worse.
And when you went to San Francisco, you did have some support from your family, but a very limited amount, right?
Oh yeah, have you heard that story?
I think I have.
Yes.
But I'd love for you to elaborate.
Well, they were like, it was the mid 90s. I was graduating from school. I had wanted to go to NYU, couldn't afford it. I knew I was not going to stay in central Pennsylvania, and I really didn't want to move home to Maryland. And so I said, I'm moving to San Francisco. And of course, they were like, parents, like, you have no money, really. You have no place to live. You have no job. And a one-way plane ticket. Are you insane? Like, what do you stay home, make money, get a job, be responsible? And I said, no, I'm going to go. And then they said, well, if you do, like, the only reason to call us is for a plane ticket home. Like, we're not going to pay your rent. We're not going to, help you out. And I was so pissed that they would say that to me.
Yeah.
Not because I was spoiled, but more because it was sort of like, how dare you?
Yeah.
That it was probably the best thing they ever could have said.
Sure.
Then I moved here, and by any means necessary, I was not going to call them.
You had something to prove at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly. Yeah. And I look back on it now, and I'm like so glad, because they had different relationships with each of their three children, and that was sort of the way I went, and I think in a way, they were more supportive in some ways of the other two in ways that I look at now and I go, oh, I think I had it the best because I had to figure things out really quickly.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, we lied. I probably shouldn't say how we survived, but like we did anything we could to survive,
What about some friends of yours you could say did these
Some
things?
friends of ours stole, lied, kind of cheated our way into jobs, an apartment, everything. But, it was the mid-90s, and so I don't know how long you guys have been here. You look too young to have been
started
here
in 2007.
Okay, yeah. So
I'm a San Franciscan.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, this is home for me. So
yeah.
And I was definitely places I probably shouldn't have been
Right.
at that time. But I was there anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was just different. It was before the first .com boom.
Yeah.
It was still very bohemian and magical, and
what was the affordability at the time?
At the time, I mean, 3 of us at 22 years old were able to live in a beautiful apartment in the Richmond, not even in the outer Richmond. It was like 3rd Avenue in California, kind of this sort of modern apartment with like, one of us worked at Just Desserts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like kind of like coffee counter service jobs. I was an assistant manager at a Landmark theater. It was just... We didn't have really good jobs or anything. So you could, at that time, you could work in a video shop or a coffee shop and pay to live with roommates, but have your own room,
Right. Right.
Yeah, the creative class were able to live in San Francisco for a long time.
Yeah.
For sure. You didn't have to be super wealthy to be there, unlike now, which is
well, then it all
very different
changed
world.
with the first .com boom.
Yeah.
Then that kind of fell out, and we had like a reprieve, and then basically consistently, it's
climbed.
just been really hard.
Yeah.
And did you ever consider leaving San Francisco at any time?
I would say more recently, I question my love affair with the city. Not necessarily leaving, but I think I grapple more with frustrations versus my love of the city, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily, I feel like I always would like to have one foot in the city because I just love it so much and love so much about it. But a lot of the changes I don't love, and they're kind of overwhelming.
What are some of the changes for those not familiar with what's happened really to San Francisco over the last 10, 15?
Well, I mean, the biggest is, of course, the economic disparity where the rich are so rich, and the cost of living is so high because people are making so much money, and because they're young to some degree, making a lot of money, they're willing to live like they're in college, right? So they're willing to spend all this money on rent and have roommates and maybe even share a room, And it's like, do you see what you're doing? You're just lining the pockets of greedy landlords, which is one thing, but because of that, then the costs of everything, haircuts, food, groceries, skyrocket, while the poor get poorer.
Yeah.
And I find that while we've always had public homelessness and drug addiction and mental illness, that our sort of callousness and our inability to even look at people is it's inhumane, and it's just sad and gross, and and you can't live in this city and not have to grapple with that. Like it almost feels like a third world country. Like I've been to Manila, where the rich are so rich and the poor are so poor, and as the city evolves, I feel like that's where we're at.
Wow. Do you feel the same
absolutely.
way?
Yeah, that's why we actually moved out of the city proper. We finally, after being there for so long, we wanted to be able to get there easily, obviously. But at the same time, it became too much. And exactly what you said, it's very, very sad. And people's callousness towards it is sort of upsetting.
Yeah.
Especially with the homeless, and when the homeless sort of with mental illness, and that there's no real support systems or understanding of what's needed to sort of help those people.
And, not a few blocks away, like at the doorstep of Twitter, of Uber, of these $1 billion, whatever companies, where it's like, there's no philanthropic part of your organization that can build a hospital or,
or some kind of shelter or
something. I mean, it used to be, the Rockefellers, and there was a part of the American capitalist society and structure where maybe it wasn't required, but philanthropy and responsibility was part of accruing wealth.
Right. It was part of the fabric of,
And now it's just so gross. It's all gone. And, and now you have Amazon employees and Walmart employees who live on food stamps. And, it's just like, so it's not just San Francisco. That is one thing I'll say about traveling so much, which I get to do. The conversations we're having about San Francisco, while maybe more extreme, kind of exist in any city I'm kind of mildly interested in.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
true. I love Seattle. They're having the same conversations. Austin, Texas, the same thing. Even when you go to like Amsterdam or out of the country, they're grappling with and this stuff. So
wow, okay, so it's an international.
It is international,
sort of disease.
I mean, Amazon was considering Amsterdam, and Amsterdam was saying, "Please don't."
And Amazon just pulled out of Queens, right? They were going to do a whole thing there
because people basically protested, right? And activists fought it. Thank God for them,
because I think property values were going to initially triple and then go higher. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
When you have these employees that are working at these companies, a lot of them are making six figures and yet they still have to live in their car.
Yeah.
Because they can't afford to live anywhere near their work. And so they're, sort of living in their car during the week and then driving to their apartment, which is 2 hours away on the weekends and coming back. It's nuts. Or you get out of your $500 a month bullshit parking spot and step over, someone who's sleeping on the sidewalk. It's just,
which is such a world away from the San Francisco of old. I mean, this is my first trip to San Francisco, but just
really,
but I've just had read so much about it. I've just watched from afar and been stunned. Every once in a while, I go on Craigslist just to see what the apartment rates are.
Well, I think if we didn't have rent control, most of us would all be gone. Anyone that's
what happened to me. I was like, I'm going to move out of the city. Watch me go. I'm still smuck. And then I was like, oh, you mean the 30% rent increase this year? Oh, I'm going to just swallow that down. Give me a second.
That's why we ended up buying, honestly. It was because it was easier than having our rent go. It was insane. I was like, we're paying a mortgage already. We might as well.
It's cheaper to keep her.
Cheaper to keep her.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we're the Golden Shackles, my partner and I. Teeny tiny little apartment, but right in Hayes Valley.
Got that rent control.
With rent control in a building with fantastic neighbors. We all celebrate Thanksgiving together.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, there's drag queens that live across the hall from me who've been doing I don't know if you know Mrs. Vera and Vera Sphere. They live right across the hall. And, Sand, who's our downstairs neighbor. It's very Tales of the City. She's 80-something years old. She's a former Vegas showgirl. She worked with Liberace, or Lee, as she calls him, for a decade. Has amazing stories. In the 80s, she became an experimental musician. Has the best stories. And so my partner and I kind of take care of her a little bit, make sure, because again, she's living in San Francisco. If anything happens to this apartment, I mean, she sometimes can't pay for her cat food, Yeah. And so we get her Trader Joe's gift certificates and, make sure that she's driven places. But I would much rather live in a building like that where we look after each other.
Right.
I mean, my partner and I are the youngest people in the building. No, that's not true. A young couple moved in downstairs and they're wonderful. But it's very much a relic of the past.
Yeah.
Sure.
That does not, this kind of living, when I moved to San Francisco, this kind of knowing your neighbors, being friends with people you lived with, being part of a community that was creative and vibrant. And, that was normal.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. And now people come over to our building because you walk in the hallways, it looks like sort of a David Lynch, Almodovar kind of explosion. It's like really all the walls are painted. There's huge paintings everywhere. And people go, oh my God, your building's so crazy. It's like, this was the norm, at one time.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
What are the buildings like now? Like, say, the newer apartment buildings? What's the situation?
Colder.
Yeah.
I mean, when you realize that you're just being basically gouged for every penny, not all of them. I have friends who live, again, I think some of the rent control buildings where the landlords have been good people and, taking care of. The sad thing about that, though, is it is the minority. The majority are now these buildings run by these rental companies.
Yeah.
Sure. Faceless, essentially.
And everyone,
Yes.
even the single family homes who rent out, they're all doing this tricky thing now where they're like, oh, you have to move out because a family member's going to move in. There's like this legal loophole. And then they renovate it and then rent it out for 3 times as much.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
And those owner move-in evictions were so popular at one point, they had to create another law, to kind of really manage them. It's just, it's been very ugly.
Yeah.
And, with social media, every day you feel like you're following some new friend's saga about their eviction.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Just got my notice. You're going to increase my rent to $7,000 a month now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or small businesses that had been there, that had been cornerstones of neighborhoods for decades.
Yeah.
Having to leave as well. Castro
Chow.
shop. Yes.
I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Who knows why they're really closing? Sometimes I think we make assumptions,
Sure.
that might not necessarily be true, but there are so many that have been pushed out that you kind of feel like, well, they probably were pushed out because of a rent increase.
Sure. Yeah. And it's very much like New York. All these great places are closing. And I'm originally from the Boston area, which, is wildly different now than it was 25 years ago, and certainly different than like 40 years ago when it was like considered kind of a mini New York, like sort of a junior.
Right.
And none of that stuff is around now.
Boston and New York, especially New York, just feels like, wow, there really is a Starbucks and a Dunkin' Donuts on every corner of the East Village.
Yeah.
It's like, this was the East Village.
Yeah,
like this was the mecca of some of the most important and vibrant creativity. And now it's just meh.
Yeah, and there was even struggles with Club Cumming and their cabaret license.
Oh,
like
really?
there was some neighbor, trying to shut it down or whatever.
Shocker.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think
And
they
he's
finally.
a celebrity.
Yeah, I know. You think they'd love to? Oh no,
Yeah.
Alan Cumming, like right down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've been loving watching the gentrification of Oakland, too. Like, that is just the craziest thing.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I was on BART and I saw, like, a lone small child with his lacrosse stick walk off the subway. And I was like,
Yeah.
that just ain't right. That ain't right. That is
Yeah.
not the city I know.
And again,
It's different.
it's everywhere.
Yeah,
It really
it
is.
Yeah.
Any interesting American urban environment
Yeah.
has artisanal toast.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Right, yeah.
that's
Sure,
where
yeah.
we're headed.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it's also international. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, you guys kind of moved to the suburbs in a way, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, are the interesting underground, irreverent, edgy folks going to go suburban?
Sure,
Maybe.
right.
I have a lot of friends, especially in the New York area, like Justin Vivian Bond and really like New York staples of
Sure.
of just underground culture, queer culture,
Yeah.
really amazing folks moving to, like small towns.
Right.
Really small towns, like one traffic light type towns.
Wow,
And
yeah.
buying old Victorian houses and things,
Yeah.
And I have to say, I totally get it.
Don't you just
know?
fantasize about it late at
I
night?
do. Well, we talk about how we could, maybe someday like keep our apartment in San Francisco, but we'll never be able to buy in the city proper.
Sure.
But, kind of have our eyes on other places.
Yes,
that might
running
be
close
affordable.
enough to get back and forth.
Or
and-
maybe not close enough. Like we've actually talked about Portugal, stuff
Wow.
like where you can get the golden visa, because if you buy something this old or spend this much money or whatever you get, it kind of automatically comes with a visa.
Oh,
My
wow.
partner is Turkish, so we're in a binational relationship already. So the idea of being in a different country does not scare us.
Sure, yeah. And you travel so much
And
anyway.
I love to travel, yeah.
There you go. And how long have you and your partner been together?
7 years.
How did you meet?
Grindr.
Oh, that's lovely. That's fabulous. That gives everyone hope when they're like, oh, these goddamn apps, I can't
Right.
meet anyone. There you go.
Well, and it's funny because it sounds like so lascivious, but the reality of it is I don't go out to meet people very often, and you can hook up via these sex apps or whatever. But what was interesting about our meeting was that we actually did use it just to meet. Like,
Yeah.
he was in the neighborhood. We had been chatting because I traveled, so I'd chat with him, and then we wouldn't meet, and I'd fly out of town and then come back, and then it was like, oh, you're in the neighborhood again. And there was this day that he was really close, like across the street, and I was working at a coffee shop, and he was having lunch, and so we just literally walked over and had coffee. So it was sort of an innocent, It took like 3 dates before we hooked up, It's very old-fashioned.
You liked him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also think you can fuck and then have a relationship.
Absolutely. Right?
Absolutely.
Why
I
not?
have definitely.
Yeah.
That is my look. Okay.
Well, why not? Because
When
then
you
you're
are-
compatible that way.
When you're an advanced fucker, okay, like when you're a sex worker who
Sure.
fucks for a living, like,
Yeah.
you need a certain amount of skill, experience, and like down ass attitude.
Enthusiasm.
You don't know that until you take it for a ride. You just don't know. You
Yeah,
need that
it's
test
true.
drive.
If you put that off too long and then suddenly you're like, oh no.
I need to know things like, do you own lube? Yes or no, sir?
Right.
Are you
Madam.
aware of the importance of this, that, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Do you like talking? You don't. Oh, okay. I should have known that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's look at your film collection.
And speaking of film collections, you are quite the film buff.
Yes.
And I want to know what the first movie that you remember as a kid that like just made you go like, oh, I like these things.
The one that I remember really strongly is Psycho. Because I think it was one of the first real horror movies I'd been exposed to as a really young kid.
Yeah.
And I also think there's an inherent queerness in that movie with him. Obviously, he's such a mama's boy, and he's not playing it butch, that's for sure. And I just was fascinated by it, how dark it was, how scary it was. I thought it was so shocking.
Sure.
And watched it repeatedly. And I think, too, in the 80s, it was really easy as a kid to be exposed to things that you shouldn't have been.
Totally, the video store.
Yeah.
Especially the mom and pop video stores.
Mom and pop video stores. I mean, I rented things I never should have been allowed to rent,
Yeah.
And I was just attracted to darkness and horror at a really young age. But it was really probably Psycho that was the first. We got Psycho from the library.
Yeah, which you could do. You could do the
rent
records
movies.
and VHS from the library was like the greatest thing. But also I have to mention, and I'm sure you're a fan of this movie, Crimes of Passion.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. And so Anthony Perkins in that actually did poppers for real on the set to get
did he?
into that
Oh, that's
space.
hilarious.
Yeah,
Love it.
it's so good. Anyone who hasn't seen it, Ken Russell, get the unrated version.
Yeah. Somewhere was just showing it in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
I think they just did a screening of it at the Alamo Draft House.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember looking at it and going like, wow, that'd be so cool to go see Crimes of Passion at the movie theater.
That
we
would
do
be.
have exhibitors now in San Francisco, the Roxy and the Alamo, and where repertory stuff is still
Oh,
strong
cool.
in San Francisco. Not as strong as Los Angeles, of course, but I'm glad that I live in a city where you can still go see a movie like that.
Totally. I mentioned the new Beverly Theater so often. It's part of a
love
drinking
it.
game for the show. People are like, every time you mention
really?
it, take a shot. Yeah. So I love that place. And anytime I schedule a trip, I'm like, please don't do an all-nighter when I'm away. Okay. I'm out.
Right.
Although I did miss Skate Town, USA. They showed that, and it kind of broke my heart a little bit. But what's your favorite repertory theater?
Well, I mean, when I moved here, the Castro Theater was still being programmed by Anita Manga, who was such a brilliant programmer. Sadly, all of that kind of programming, full-time repertory programming, with the exception of maybe the Roxy, is kind of left the city. And so the Castro, while still an amazing movie palace, and certainly where my home is as far as a performer, because we do all of our shows there, they can't program the way Anita used to program and make it work. So they do a lot of these sing-alongs and runs of things like Bohemian Rhapsody and which is fabulous, and it makes sense. But back then, oh my God, she'd do like a week of Takashi Miike's audition, and it would be packed. Or they'd do like 2 nights of Grey Gardens, and it would sell out.
Yeah,
like an old documentary would sell out the Castro. It was amazing. And sadly, because of streaming and DVDs and everything now being accessible, those sorts of the heyday of repertory stuff is gone.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably the Roxy is the truest still. The Alamo obviously isn't the modern version of it. They have multiplexed the audio. I mean, thank God I'm not criticizing them at all, because they went into a cinema that had sat empty and been squatted in for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
In the Mission.
Okay, yeah.
Luckily, it had never been torn down, and they went in and restored this thing to its beautiful grandeur, but they took the balcony and put a bunch of mini screens up there.
Okay, sure.
Which I get, because that's how they're going to make it work financially.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're selling food, and they have a big bar there. I love their model because it's really sustainable as far as keeping cinema going. But the Roxy is still that old, rundown, creepy.
Still got the smell.
The smell. It's got the old projection booth, and I really give credit to these folks in our organization who do the producing. A show there called Film School Dropouts, which is sort of the grandchild of Midnight Mass. So Veruca Bath Saltz and Jerry Lee co-host pre-shows before screenings. It's very much the Peaches Christ show of the 90s.
Sure.
And they do that bi-monthly. And so like their next one is they just did Rock and Roll High School.
Oh God, I love that movie so much.
Amazing.
And I actually saw that when I was so young and I was a fan of the Monkees that I thought the Ramones were a made-up band made for the movie.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that makes sense actually. Why wouldn't you think that? Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And they did a pre-show with a band, and they're just great. And their upcoming screening, oh God, I should promote it here, but it's you can find it at theroxy.com. Is Nowhere, the Greg Araki film.
Oh, okay.
So just the fact that like these guys can,
do that range.
Do that. Yeah.
When we're talking about the golden age of repertory theater also and the golden age of VHS shops, we have access to so many more things theoretically now, but there isn't that accidental discovery that you were sort of mentioning before or alluding to.
And I saw everything, because you'd rent like 4 or 5 for the weekend.
Yeah. And,
watch them and then return them. And also too, you rented based on what the cover looks like.
Sure.
Like an album.
Yeah.
It was sort of like we didn't have trailers we could stream. We didn't have you basically looked at the and they used to have these big giant Herschel Gordon Lewis clamshell ones.
I love the clamshell.
Where the Color Me Blood Red and the Wizard of Gore and all that. As a kid, I rented Caligula.
Oh wow!
Because no one told me not to.
One of the only movies where they really fuck.
I couldn't believe it.
They used to keep that behind the counter at the movie house, the place I rented from, and then later bought most of their stock because there was buy any VHS for $2.50, and then it eventually became 50 cents, and then I was like hauling boxes of stuff out of there.
Yeah.
Hey, it's John Cameron Mitchell on a beautiful spring day in New York. And I really love your show, Craig, but I really do need to know, for my own peace of mind, and perhaps yours, if you're gay. Are you gay? I always like to know when someone's gay. Forget I asked this if it's uncomfortable for you, but it's an uncomfortable world, so you should be ready to be uncomfortable.
Now, you mentioned the Kuchar Brothers. Tell everyone a little bit about them who might not know.
Well, they were Mike and George Kuchar, actual brothers who made films, experimental films in San Francisco. Back when experimental filmmaking was popular, and there was this how would you describe Canyon Cinema at the time? And still, I think it's kind of a cooperative distribution company where you could basically get these movies and screen them for very little, like a fraction of, you do a profit share. And it was very much a movement that was specific to San Francisco.
Okay.
That was modeled in other cities, but like Barbara Hammer, the Kuchar Brothers, tons of the best experimental filmmakers came out of the Bay Area. That being said, a lot of experimental film I cannot watch. It drives me crazy. I don't get it. But the Kuchar Brothers were, George was such a flamboyant weirdo who made weird, crazy movies. They were from New York, but moved to the Bay Area. But they were making these movies that were really inspired by Hollywood films. But they were just so campy and weird and bad, and often had drag featured. And I mean, one of the movies that George actually co-made, not with Mike, but that should be sought out, is a film called Thundercrack. That's a feature also with real fucking.
Oh wow!
And considered one of the more outrageous narrative pornographic films, which I got the pleasure of producing a screening at the Castro of it in honor of its anniversary, and part of that was because it got a big Blu-ray re-release.
Oh, okay.
So you can find Thundercrack now on Blu-ray. But yeah, they were just wild. And then George went on to teach at the San Francisco Art Institute, where he became famous for every semester the kids, or I should say students, because some of them might not have been kids, but most of them were young. They would make a movie with George, and these movies are insane. They're just crazy, wild. And there's also a great documentary Jennifer Crute made a few years ago, if you want to know more about these guys, called It Came From Kuchar.
Okay.
And, you know, that will really fill you in better than I can.
Mm-hmm. After Psycho, what are some of the other movies that really did it for you?
Well, the classics. I mean, like...
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a big thing for me. I don't know why. The first Nightmare on Elm Street was a big thing because I'd never seen that sort of combination of fantasy and horror so effectively and so creatively. I mean, what I love about A Nightmare on Elm Street is that Bob Shea of New Line Cinema had a teeny tiny little office in Manhattan, and when no one would take Pink Flamingos, nobody would take Pink Flamingos. It was Bob Shea and his little New Line Cinema office who decided to try to screen it at midnight. Well, the rest is history. Pink Flamingos screened at midnight for years. It was a big hit. And put him in a position where when Wes Craven was turned down by every big distributor, every big studio, and here he has this script. I mean, imagine the script for Nightmare on Elm Street. No one had seen anything like it. I mean, it's so creative. You know, this guy haunts you in your dreams, you know, and he has razor
And just
fingers.
as a filmmaker, the story is amazing because you are in a dreamland half the time. You can do anything you want.
Do anything. Sky's the limit.
Anytime. Like, I dream of setting myself up with that scenario and go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it was Wes Craven after he'd already made some major hits.
Kind of. I mean, Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, they were independent films.
Yeah.
They were successful in the genre world, but they weren't those sorts of blockbuster, you know.
Sure.
So people, you know, and for A Nightmare on Elm Street, basically Bob Shea scraped together more money than they ever spent on any movie. But really, at the time, it was a very low budgeted film.
Sure.
You know, very indie, you know, low budget. So I love that, you know, that New Line Cinema, they call it the house that Freddie built, you know, which then went on to make Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? So it's like Freddie and that creativity, you know, of course the sequels become, you know, what they became.
Do you have a favorite sequel?
Well, Dream Warriors, of course.
Of course. I mean, you can't beat Dawkins.
No. And also, too...
Greg Wasson. Sorry, I had to get that in there.
Well, of course. But it's that thing where it's Wes Craven, once again, stepped back in. You know, the second one, which is the gay one, of course, with Mark Patton.
And there's that whole documentary about how
coming out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming out soon, and I'm really excited to see it.
Me too.
But... that was frustrating for fans and frustrating for, I think, Wes to some degree. So he agreed to come back in and create the story with his son for Dream Warriors. And of course, it makes a huge difference. You know, it was very satisfying.
So that's my favorite sequel as well. Oh, and of course, when he came back for New Nightmare.
I love that too. Again, Wes Craven. Again.
Yeah. And then totally this bananas idea of making it them playing themselves and everying. And Heather Langenkamp coming back. Yeah. Right, exactly.
And okay, I have a story about Heather Langenkamp that I think is really funny.
Please.
So I'm a horror nerd, obviously, right? So I did this horror convention in Indianapolis called Horror Hound with Elvira, another person I idolize, idolize, right? And then get to work with and become friends with, like, you know, had lunch with her the other day when I was in LA, and like still to this day, you know, she came to see Mean Gaze, and you know, still, and it was like whispering in my ear, like, you know, she's just become my mentor, but I'll always be a fan. Always worship her. Same thing with my friendships with John and Mink and stuff. It's like I'll never stop being a fan, even though in some ways doing more normal things with them is weirder than doing a show. You know,
right.
You know, like so Cassandra and I are doing this horror convention, but we're out of drag. We're going down to the lobby to have dinner or something. And so the elevator opens, and you know, you're at this sort of like airport hotel, you know, where you're not really near anything in Indianapolis, and the convention kind of takes over, and so there's horror fans everywhere. So you're kind of fine being incognito, and Peaches is certainly not like popular the way Elvira or Heather Langenkamp is. In fact, I'm kind of maybe the scariest thing there to a lot of people that attend, you know, because you know, it's very straight, you know, some of these horror conventions. Anyway, so I get in the elevator with Cassandra. We go down a floor. Elevator doors open up. It's Heather Langenkamp and Amanda Wyss, who plays Tina in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. They both look amazing. I mean, they look like older versions of themselves. Just very, you know, and just really not
Like
to say something rude, but you go to
yeah.
these conventions and you're kind of like, oh no, you meet people and you're like, oh my God,
That's different.
you've had it rough,
So that's why we haven't seen you.
Yeah.
Got it. That's different than I remember.
But they look great, and they get in the elevator, and I go, oh my God, I'm so sorry, but I do the thing that you don't want any. I'm such a I couldn't control myself, and they give me, and they were sweet about it, but to give me the polite.
We're in very close quarters right now.
Yes, you can stop talking now. We've said you've said what you needed to say.
Yeah.
Acknowledged.
So we're standing there, and Cassandra's like pissed that they're not giving me more. So she's like,
love this.
This is Peaches Christ. Okay, this right here. This is Peaches Christ. This is a famous horror drag queen. Get
it together.
You should do a show with her.
Yeah.
And
That's why your friend should always be hyped.
Exactly. You gotta have a hype bitch. I'm just saying.
And they're totally like, oh my God, thank you. Oh yeah, okay. So then I'm like, well, this is Elvira. And then of course they freak out, So it was just a very surreal elevator ride.
Nicest thing I've ever heard.
That is so lovely. Yeah.
It was a little embarrassing actually because they weren't still that impressed. They were kind of like, who?
And then you were like, but that's Elvira.
Yeah, exactly. Then they were impressed.
Keep sending it down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Elvira's telling you something. Just so you know. Yeah.
You do know where you are, right?
But they were lovely. I mean, I won't say anything bad about them.
I'm sure, of course
never.
Not. Yeah.
I have walked up to porn stars I have literally either directed or had sex with recently, and they're like, nice to meet you.
Oh,
like,
right.
You fuck a lot of people. I'm going to just choose not to be offended by that. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're not a faces person, I guess. Yeah.
I've been doing this 15 years. It's fine.
Hold on, let me turn around.
Yeah.
You didn't have a hype woman. We could have sorted this out.
Right. Do you know who you're talking to right now?
You can't do that for yourself. You
don't
can't
recognize me without my drag, and
fair.
without.
Isn't that nice?
In a way, it's sort of like if you're not presenting the way they're accustomed to.
Exactly, and I
Yeah.
love to change my hair. I walk into people who know me well, and they're like, "Who are you? Who are you?"
It's kind of like a superhero kind of thing because people don't think that you're in a room with them often. Where they're talking about you, and you're kind of like, wow, this is weird. Like, should I tell them that I'm standing right here? Or, I've had people tell me, Peaches, she put me on the list. And I'm like,
Wow.
Okay, and how do you know her? Oh, we're really good friends. It's sort of like they don't know that they're talking to me. Yeah.
That's amazing. And did they get in? No.
Well, I mean, it's changed a little bit with social media and, of course, Drag Race.
Oh,
because there was a time where we didn't show ourselves out of our character.
It was like Kiss.
Yeah,
you never
exactly.
knew what the hell they looked like.
You wanted to create that mystique. You wanted to, and you could because you put out press releases with photos and marketing, and you performed at shows and public events.
Yeah.
Now with social media, and then when I made a movie, and was directing the movie as Joshua and stuff, I had to make a decision. But I have some drag performer friends who really don't show themselves out of character, but that now is very old school because Drag Race really has changed it because they become famous both in drag and out of drag.
Right,
They shoot them both ways.
And the transformation itself is half of what is so fascinating. Just watching the change from point A to point B, and you get invested in that story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's your feeling overall about Drag Race?
I think it's terrible. No, I'm just kidding. I think that's what everyone thinks I should say. Like I should be some bitter queen about it. And the reality of it is, I have not auditioned. If I wanted to go on the show, I should audition. So I think any older queen or successful queen who's sort of, I feel like I get asked about it in this way that's like, does it annoy you? And I'll say this, I love what it's done for drag in terms of making it more popular and more of a viable business, and really given not just the girls who are on the show, but a lot of us a bigger platform.
Sure.
And I actually am entertained by the show. I'm a fan of the show. When I first invited Sharon Needles to come and do a show with us, we already had the show planned. We were already doing shows at the Castro. I was naive to how much of a response that would get.
Sure.
You know, and so of course then I'm like, oh my God, these bitches have marquee value. You know, I should work with more of
3 or
them.
4 of them.
Yeah. And you know, so that was an evolution, but I will only work with people that inspire me or that I'm interested in working with. That being said, I do think as much as the show has been wonderful and very successful in a good and positive way for a lot of us, I built a career on being niche and underground and weird. And so there's part of me that doesn't feel like it's a fit for me as a contestant,
right?
And not a fit for a lot of drag that I admire. I think you should not look to Drag Race to represent all of drag, and I think too many people do that and then are frustrated by Drag Race. Too many of my friends even where I'm like, yeah, but it's a TV show, it's just one thing, it's just sort of dominating right now. But for artists, you know, that aren't ever going to be on Drag Race, I still think it benefits us. I still think it's opening people's minds.
I'm sorry, but look, we have this, you know, subculture that gets commercialized too, and like bad things come with exposure. You have to clean up your act more. You get on the VH1 suddenly, you got to just start behaving and obeying certain things, and that's not what we do, which is just not nice. But I think especially like on this side of the room, we all come from the East Coast and smaller places where like they ain't no drag club where I'm from.
Sure.
You know,
Right.
Drag Race and having that exposure to like, you know, 99% of our country where we don't live is like life changing for a lot of like baby queers and artists out there who try to be weird.
That's the part that I really love is the baby queer part, because for in drag, in trans identity and all the gray areas, when I was growing up, you know, and we had tranny shack, you know, which, you know, now tranny is a pejorative. Back then it was, and it's hard to tell young people this because they don't believe it, but it's like, it actually was a term of endearment.
Right.
And because we were so vilified together, trans women, drag performers who were cis men, drag performers who were trans women, people who were anything in between, non-binary, all of us,
even within the gay community, still getting that hate.
even hated by gay pride parades. Tranny Shack was an umbrella community. The straight men, transvestites, you know, who cross-dressers who would come there with their wives and cruise each other.
Yeah.
It was amazing because if we got beat up, I got beat up the same way she got beat up. So it didn't really matter what, we were all sisters.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what our sexuality was, what our genitalia was, anything. Back then, Animatronic, a cis woman, was a regular performer of ours who, she was a fierce queen. We didn't care that she had a vagina. You know, it's like, now I feel like I miss, again, sound old, but I miss those days in some ways where drag was still underground enough. Now, I'm happy for progress. I mean, I'm glad gay people can get married. I'm glad trans folks have more rights. I am so happy for that. But I do miss a time where there was way less infighting and way less nitpicking about each other because we were all in the same boat.
Right. There wasn't even enough to like break into subgroups and cliques and like little...
We're just tearing each other apart.
Yeah.
And anyway, but I think Drag Race, the negative part that I was going to bring up is I'm not a big fan of its evolving fan culture.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, ew, where
it's
are
so
these
weird
people
to watch
coming
because
from?
I feel like sometimes gay porn can be kind of similar. Like I work with a lot of, well, I produce and direct gay porn sometimes. So like, you know, and that's nasty. Like, especially if you are
the
not
fans
even known.
Fans are the worst.
The fans are
see, I'm
not
kind of out.
known as.
I know the gay porn world. I'm friends with performers and producers, but I'm not part of the culture, so I haven't seen the fan culture.
Those blogs, though, y'all.
So
those
what's some of the
blogs.
nastiness? Give us a little taste of the...
He doesn't deserve to be here. He likes vagina. Did you see he has a girlfriend? I went on his social media. He's not gay at all. I'm like, sir, you're in the closet. Like, what are you doing? That's the only reason you mad. Like, why are you mad and yelling?
Right.
You want a gay porn blog.
I mean, the Drag Race fans now will tell these girls to go kill themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know.
That's
Or
exactly it.
threaten.
Like,
Yeah.
that crazy. It's just and it's... I don't know, it's coming from that shame and guilt spiral within and like pressing it out. But then there is this extra like bitchy, catty. That's the thing I hate about the competitive nature.
Yeah.
I
Well,
understand.
that's the thing. I could never
know.
succeed on that show because they keep talking about doing this Legends show, not World of Wonder. I mean, when I say they, I mean fans. and then it gets brought up in queer blogs and stuff. And there was one time where they thought we were shooting it because enough of us were gone or something. And, the idea would be to put me and Jackie Beat and Varla Jean Merman and Coco Peru and Vaginal Cream Davis and Flotilla DeBarge and Lady Bunny all in a drag race style show. And the reality of it is we don't compete with each other that way.
Right.
That's not how we've evolved.
Right.
So we'd be like, oh, well, that challenge is for Coco.
Yeah.
Because you clearly are the monologue
thing.
writer.
You'd kill that. Why don't you do that?
Like, I'm not going to go for it,
It really kind of, the competition aspect leads to a weird conformity.
And also,
because you're
everything's
going
a
towards
competition
this ideal,
now.
and like, you have to sing, you have to dance, you have to be funny, you have to dress right. And so like, everybody becomes this perfect.
And they bring it to everything. Like, even my shows, they come to see Mean Gays. They have to choose a favorite. It's like, this person was the best. It's like, you know what? Actually, we're team. Yeah. And so I may not have been as funny as that person because it was her job to be the funny, dumb one.
Right.
And my job was to keep the show on it or whatever. It's like, it's not a competition. It's a whole show. We're working together to produce a show for you. But everything's a competition. And that is an effect of the TV show for sure.
Sure.
And the internet in general. It's just brutal there now.
Yeah.
People feel like they can say anything they want on the internet.
It's nasty.
Like
So
they don't care.
And some of these are the queer kids in Idaho that we were like hoping to reach. It's like, wait a second. You're this is how you're behaving? No. I don't want you to. You don't get to tell so and so that they should go kill themselves.
Right.
You can't behave, but they do, and
It's
you know.
interesting. It's like an exposure to drag to people who haven't had to have what I like to call the PC ass whooping that you get when you actually get to a place like San Francisco where you learn you don't say that, and we don't do that, and that's not funny here. It might be funny in Idaho, but I don't care. Like you still don't get to do that.
Learning how to be at the cocktail party, basically.
Yeah. Well, every time, friends from home come from like Indiana or South Carolina or like somewhere else, you're like, okay, which one of my friends is going to lay the smack down first? Because it's going to happen a little bit, at least once. Go ahead.
And we have bigger fish to fry. Do you not know who's in the White House? It's like, are we kidding? This is how you, as a young queer person, are spending your energy attacking some girl that did something on TV you didn't like because she played a game and sent another girl home. Like, maybe take that energy and focus on the fact that we are in the most fucked up situation. Maybe that's overwhelming and they can't access, it's sort of like if ever there was a time for mobilization and activism and progressives getting together, it's like, but we can't. We just can't.
And especially these isolated people, like we sit in this lovely liberal little bubble we've created
Even
for
here,
ourselves.
we're fighting with each other all the time,
It's
though.
so true.
I look at my friends online, I'm like, wait a second. You're all fighting over the use of this word or this queen said this thing. It's like, shut up.
Sit it and quit it, Barbara.
Yeah.
I know. I hate that. And BDSM people love to do it. They're like, no, submissive means this and slave means that. And that's different.
Dominant. Never switch.
How about you get over yourself?
Right.
Lighten up. It's a game. Put your guilt on it. Be done.
Heclina said this. And I think at first when she said it flippantly, I was like, she would comment like on these fights and really piss people off. This is why we have the president we do.
Yeah.
And it was like,
exactly.
and at first I was like, whoa, that's kind of, but then as I would see these fights more and more, I'm like, she's absolutely right. Like when the gay community was devastated by AIDS, the queer community, lesbians came in and took care of these men.
Right.
The men that were well enough joined women who were well enough, and they formed ACT UP, and they responded. They were activist group. I mean, and I'm looking and I'm like, is this situation we're in not as horrifying? I mean, no, people aren't dying the same way, but like it's terrifying. I mean, he could literally destroy us. So it's sort of like, why are we just sitting around fighting each other? I don't get it.
We mentioned Jizzmopper earlier, the film you made at Penn State, and that's also the time that you became a drag performer almost by necessity because one of your actors wasn't showing up.
Yeah, like not showing up for shoots or rehearsals. Basically, I had one foot out the door.
Okay.
And it was like one of those things where if we didn't do something to replace the character, rewrite the character, they used to dissolve projects, so you'd be absorbed into another project. So because we were shooting on film, we were using really expensive equipment. I think at the beginning of the semester, at the beginning of senior year, you'd start off with this many I don't know, films, and then this many would get greenlit. And this many would get rolling, but really only a small fraction actually made it to being a finished film. But
sure.
The professors basically used that as a weed out process so that they weren't wasting resources and money. So instead of, that happening to us, we were fighting because we were the black sheep. Everyone else kind of wanted to be like Martin Scorsese at the time, like it was all straight white men, and my group was like me, Crystal Jackson, who was like this fierce black woman who knew sound design and sound recording, the crazy comic Jewish guy, and then the really weird Christian. That was my film crew.
Yeah.
It was the four of us. We're getting credit for this movie. And of course it was, at the end of the year, me and the crazy Christian who got the film in the can and bonded and, stayed up all night working together. And, so it kind of could have been its own movie in a way, the making of the movie.
Right.
But when the actor wasn't showing up, the video tests we'd do, I would step in and play the queen. And one of our professors was like, okay, you clearly know how to do this. Are you really, are you sure you don't want to just step in front of the camera?
Yeah. Is there some reason that we don't know? Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, and I had been an improv performer in high school and college. And so once I realized that drag was something I could do scripted, like in Jizzmopper, I started to think about ways to take my improv stuff and put it to use with Peaches.
Yeah.
And that, in a way, is why I think I've had longevity, because I wasn't that interested in lip syncing. I love lip syncing. I think a great lip sync artist is fascinating to watch. I just was never good at that. So it wasn't my strength. But realizing I could MC shows, I could keep a show on its tracks, and I could be a storyteller through improv or scripted stuff. That was really where I was like, oh, this is how I can use Peaches.
Yeah.
Now I tell young queens, like, you don't have to be good at everything, despite what the TV show makes you believe. Be good at something, or really good at something.
And do the part of it you love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That makes you happy.
You don't have to do a death drop.
That's the thing. It's like, I also didn't enter the drag world thinking it would ever become a career. Now you've got all these people who are entering, like I'm going to be a nurse when I grow up, or I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a drag queen. Well, that just option didn't exist for me.
Days, I'm going to be a drag brand.
A drag brand,
Right.
And it's like, well, honestly, maybe if I wasn't going to be on the show, this thing that a bunch of us did, where we had to figure it out on our own and build an audience on our own and put one foot in front of the other. I look at me and like Coco and people that have been doing this for 25 years or more, 30 years, and realize, see, we'll always have what we have because of the way that we built it. Whereas some of these younger people, I'm like, you're depending on one TV show that thousands upon thousands of people now are applying for.
Right.
And you're waiting for that. And you're creating this thing so that you get on it instead of just doing your thing.
Right.
Just do your thing, whatever that may be.
And when you do your own thing, no one can take it away from you.
No, and you might end up being Dina Martina or Christine or something that is so fabulous and so incredible because you've opened your mind to the possibilities of what drag could be.
Right.
And you made your own niche, because I think in porn, some of the worst things that you can do is like listen to your agent, who will try to like change your look and change you into being like, I don't know, what everybody else is. But that's not what gets you noticed and makes you stand out and like actually gives you that longevity.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Because I'm at a meeting with a manager in LA who said the first thing they were going to do was change my drag name.
Oh, no.
I was like,
wonderful.
Well,
hilarious.
Yeah.
What?
No, thank you.
Thank God, I've been waiting for someone to come up with something, because I just got stuck with this. Someone I never thought about it.
Yeah.
What did they want? Did they give you any options as to
No, but they knew that it had shut doors for me, which it had. But I was like, that's the whole point.
Yeah, right.
They were like, but it offends Christians.
We're going to need you to take the subversive part out of your name. Like,
I get it in a way. that's what their job is.
Well, sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I get it. Like if I were going to go that route, that Hollywood route, then that probably would have been a smart suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't how I want to love drag. You know?
Certainly. When did you start the Midnight Mass?
98.
Give me some other titles that you went with the first year.
Oh God, we did Showgirls.
Of course, that's
which,
a heavy association.
Yeah,
with
which
you,
I
right?
went on to screen for 20 years consecutively.
Wow.
Yeah. And we did Female Trouble that first year. I think we did The Bad Seed, which I love. We did the William Castle film Homicidal. We did, now I'm going to probably just jump into other years because I don't
No, that's
remember.
fine. Really, I just wanted to give an idea of the
Pee-wee's
the
Big
breadth
Adventure.
of of course. Yeah.
We used to do Peaches Playhouse as a pre-show.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Peaches would come out as the, Peaches Herman and all the Playhouse characters. Cherry was a lesbian. And so when women would sit on Cherry, she'd like lick them off, and like Jambi was a gay porn star.
That's the secret. No one knew that before.
I'm sorry.
No. I mean at the original Playhouse, no one knew.
but Peaches was an intolerant bigot. That was the big thing. Was I'd come out and be like, "You're a retarded cunt," and just say like really horrible stuff, and the Playhouse characters who were all these diversity of people, would come out and teach me how to celebrate diversity. But I remember we did it in San Francisco and the audience loved it. And then we took it to Berkeley, where they just couldn't get past the first act of me, saying horrible things.
I'm doing this on purpose, ma'am.
Right. In San Francisco, they kind of knew she knows what she's doing.
Right.
It'll be okay. But in Berkeley, they were just too young and
never saw All in the Family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we used to do that.
Sensitive.
Poltergeist, we did a lot.
Oh, okay.
Poltergeist is what the show was. We did The Honeymoon Killers, Spider Baby.
The Spider Baby sounds great. I've never seen that.
Oh, it's fabulous. The Apple.
Oh, The Apple is one of the greatest of all time, right?
Yeah.
It's so good. And, there was a whole thing, the missing scenes, they almost found the missing scenes for the Blu-ray release.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so for those of you who know the movie, all the stuff basically when it just jumps, there was supposed to be a creation thing where we actually learn who Mr. Tops is. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, stop. Well, after this episode, go and watch The Apple. It's essential. But there was scenes shot with like a sort of Garden of Eden type of thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then, of course, the story about the soundtrack, which is great.
So crazy.
They gave a soundtrack out to everyone at the premiere of the film. And at the end of the film, people were frisbeeing it at the screen because they were so pissed off that the movie was so bad.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. We did Sing Along Purple Rain for a number of years. Oh. We did.
Do you need? We can pause for a sec if you need.
I need to go get my dog to stop yelling at the neighbor's dog.
No,
really quickly.
We can pause for a sec.
I hear Bowie.
I'm really sad that you fell asleep during.
I know. Well, we can continue while she's doing that, actually.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that your sadness for me. I was sad for me, and
I was jealous when you made it to Troop Beverly Hills, and then I was sad.
Well, yeah. So Troop Beverly Hills was so wonderful because one of the things that's great about your parodies, because parody can sound like it can give the wrong impression. Your adaptations, because you love the things that you're.
That's true.
Skewering.
That's true. Yes, it's true. So it is parody. Actually, sometimes is a complicated,
in a way.
It's like I do earnestly love it, and we are making fun of it.
But you couldn't do it so well if you didn't love it.
It's true.
Really.
Yes. Yeah.
The performance of Troop Beverly Hills I saw, one of the actors from the film was there.
Right.
And that was such a beautiful moment. What's her name again? Because I
Tasha Scott.
Yeah.
And she plays the little girl who sings "It's Cookie Time."
Right.
And she's the one who tells the police officer off. Do you know who this is?
And her character was
my daddy.
And her character in your show
she was played by Meatball.
Meatball, who was wonderful. And it was such a magical thing to watch the actress from the original film freak out, being like, "Oh my God, people love this!" And then see Meatball seeing her. You know what I mean? It was an amazing energy transfer back and forth.
It was.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing with these cult films too, that maybe they did well, it's fine, but the obsession comes later, much later. And as a performer or even a director, it's just interesting to kind of dip back in and be like, oh, people, this touched some people. couple,
Right,
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Danny Franzese, who plays Damien in Mean Girls, came on Saturday.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of funny.
Awesome.
I was almost going to ask him if he could yell, "She doesn't even go here," from the audience. So I thought that would be so funny if the actual person, but I didn't.
You know, since I'm wearing my Pia jacket today, I want to know, do you have a favorite Pia Zadora film?
Oh, The Lonely Lady.
I mean,
Of course,
can you
yeah.
beat that at all?
It's so amazing,
It's
yeah.
incredible. And now available on Blu-ray, everyone.
Yes.
So get it and watch it.
Yeah.
I want to watch the TV version that's on the Blu-ray.
Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting.
I like but it's like 30 minutes long or something
Right,
like that.
exactly.
Like, and what's the Ray Liotta scene like? What he's just
I guess it's just cut.
yeah, he must just like make a face at her and then they go to commercial.
Right. Yeah.
Favorite John Waters film?
Favorite John Waters film would be Female Trouble.
That's mine as
Yeah.
well.
Good choice.
Yeah.
It's just such a great, perfect movie. Of the new movies, I would say Serial Mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh my
newer
God, I
movies.
love Serial.
So
Yeah.
good, yeah.
she is a massive Crybaby fan.
Oh, really?
oh, yeah.
I love Crybaby
That
too.
was incredibly influential to me growing up in South Carolina. I watched that at a way too young of an age. You're not wrong with that wrench in that VHS. Nobody
Right.
really understands.
That's when you're supposed to watch a John Waters
That's
movie.
right.
When you're a little too young.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you ever do the thing where you showed some folks that you were in school with the John Waters movie and they were a little like,
I don't know what to do with you now.
Yeah, they were like a little like, okay, I don't want him to pick the movies anymore. Yeah.
Well, I would do that with dates. You know, I would always,
That is
sort
the
of,
move. Hey, let's watch Desperate Living. You know, you're cute.
Yeah. For a while, I was showing, like, kind of would say to, potential suitors, have you seen this movie Happiness? By Todd Solondz? Because I knew if they could enjoy or appreciate Happiness, we'd be compatible. But
Yeah.
if they were, just totally turned off by it, that, it would be hard to,
Yeah.
sense of humor is so important.
Oh, it's probably maybe the most important.
Yeah.
Well, that and the sex thing. So if you do the sex thing and the comedy thing on the first, day or two, kind of in the clear, really. Political shit, whatever.
I feel like it's almost like for a long-term relationship, sex is going to, change. It's going to fizzle. It's going to ebb and flow. And but stuff like sense of humor is kind of like, God, if we don't click there,
Deciding what to watch at night happens every night.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Getting the joke in something.
Yeah.
If you can't, and then eventually you're looking at the person like, I can't stand you.
Yeah.
Oh, so ladies, do you have any final questions?
Oh, this has been fantastic.
I'm honored to share it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. It's really been a treat,
Thank
a
you.
pleasure, and an honor. And now, one last thing about the Midnight Mass screenings. You still do them? Yeah, and you travel with them? Is
Yeah,
that
well,
right?
now we do the shows, the live shows, without the screenings, because people weren't staying for the movies.
Oh, okay.
As much as I was hoping they would still be into the movies, but that's really changed. So we have the First Wives Fight Club coming up.
Are you
on April 7th?
I love
Oh, wow.
that movie.
Okay, yeah, April 7th
We
at
might
the
have to
Castro
make it to
Theater.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I know your time is about to run out, so please let's do some plugs.
Okay. Well, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and peacheschrist.com and Twitter. It's really easy to find me. I'm verified now, so on all
there
of
you go.
those. Yeah.
Very good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and
Thank
looking
you.
forward to
Thank
next
you.
time.
Thanks
Yeah.
so much.
I got lots of problems. Female trouble. Maybe I'm twisted. Female trouble. They say I'm a saint, but I don't care. Go ahead, put me in your electric chair. I got lots of problems.